Students, so let us have one more session on this series of talks on software engineering, software evolution, and with special emphasis on helping you in preparing for the interview board for placements and all those. I am not sure whether now it's the right time. You all must be planning for picnics and all those. Of course, with COVID protocol and all those. Uh, Probably we will have the last session in this series today. Last session in this series of talks today. After a brief break, we may have one more session on some other related topic, not exactly this. So, before we start, this is all we have already discussed. I will just pause for just 1 or 2 minutes on this recap. The statement which has been the de facto guiding light for our discussions. As usual, I will read this line out once again. The discipline of software engineering deals with studies on science, engineering, technology, and management of feasibility study, design, development, testing, deployment, maintenance, and evolution of software products and services based on mutually agreed upon specifications, time estimates, and cost estimates with embedded focus on maintainability, scalability, reusability, reliability, upgradability, and reconfigurability. It is extremely difficult to cover all the aspects of this statement in such in 9-10 sessions. But we have tried to do something left which we'll cover today. Uh, Um, but I've tried to do justice to whatever extent it's possible from our end. Before proceeding further, I'm just waiting for 1 or 2 minutes to help you in thinking yourself. And if you have any query, any suggestion, any observation on this sentence, please feel free to share your views. As I said, this is probably the last session in this series of talks. We may have one more session, but not on this, some related topics. That's why I think it's worth spending more time on giving you the scope for discussions, deliberations, views in open mind. Okay? If you don't have any queries, this is a slide, almost 40% of that we have discussed in the last class. Essentially, modularization, structuredness, interfacing architecture, coupling and cohesion, abstraction, information hiding, scalability, reconfigurability, more or less we had discussed, at least to explain the meaning of these terms. Rest 5, 6 we'll try to discuss today. We start with reliability. First of all, what is reliability? How do you define reliability or explain reliability? How do you say that one entity is more reliable than another entity? Let us go to the very basics. We all work on digital computers. Everybody talks about digital, digital, and digital. Before that, we had analog. Do you understand the difference between analog and digital? If you have a watch, looking at the watch, how do you know whether this is analog or digital? Analog is continuous. Digital is discrete. Again, analog is continuous. Digital means discrete. As an example, having given a straight line and you are told to find the length of that straight line, if you do it through analogous means, what do? You place a scale and then for more precision, you can have vernier and so on. So that is analog. If it is digital, what do? You have some small building block, you call it one unit, and place that unit one after another, and you say that, okay, this is so much units. In practical sense, what does it mean? Analog has the potential to give you more precise results. But the result will very much depend on the person who is measuring it. The person who is measuring it. On the other hand, reliable as a digital measurement may be more precise by shortening the length of the unit. But once again, analog is likely to be more precise, but dependent on the person who is measuring it. On the other hand, digital, depending on the length of the unit, may or may not be that precise. But one thing is sure, that it is independent of the person who is measuring it. Hence, it is much more reliable. So digital technology has to be more reliable than analog technology. Precision depending on the scenario, how you are using it. Think of an analogous scenario. From Techno India building, you want to go to the Howrah station. One scenario is there are 4 buses, but you don't know the timing of the buses. And the other scenario is there are 2 buses, but you know the timing of those buses. Which is more reliable? Obviously, the second one. I hope you could understand. There are plenty of examples. Say, there is one school A and school B. In one particular year, from school A, 2 students ranked within top 100 in JEE. But they did not have any such result for last 10 years. On the other hand, school B, one particular year, did not have any student within top 100. But for last 10 years, every year, they had 5 students in within top 200. Which one is more reliable? Think about it. With reliability, associated with reliability, two common terms are used. One is ISO and the other is ISI. ISO is more of an international standard kind of thing, and ISI is the national. But what is the difference? Think of the reliability of a bulb, electric bulb. You buy an electric bulb from the market. How reliable it is? Two ways of measuring it. One is randomly test how long a bulb will last. And the other example is, other process is test the process through which the bulb is manufactured. Through which the bulb is manufactured. ISI concentrates on the reliability of the product. On the other hand, ISO concentrates on the reliability of the process. Just now I have given you the example of a school. Just a moment, just a moment. হ্যাঁ বিভূতিদা বিভূতিদা হ্যাঁ 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 আসবেন আসবেন না না এক্ষুনি আসছে আমাকে এইমাত্র ফোন করেছি এক্ষুনি আসছে হ্যাঁ এক্ষুনি আসছে Give me just one moment, huh? Give me just one moment. Give me just a sec. Just a sec. এই কোথায় রে অধৈর্য ঢুকছিস তো হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে হ্যাঁ So just now I have given the example of the school. On one case, they are concentrating on the product. On the other case, they are concentrating on the process. Similarly, in terms of software, what is a reliable software? In some cases, you find that you are working on you have developed some GUI, and because of some wrong entry in the input, you see that abruptly the GUI breaks. That is not reliable. So how do you make it more reliable? The control of the software should always be within the software. If you remember, we have at some point of time, we had mentioned this, the notion of redundant programming and defensive programming. I give you a concrete example. Suppose you have a GUI and you have to extract data from a background file and populate the GUI with that data. Populate the GUI with that data. But when the open file segment statement in the code is going to be executed, for whatever reason, the system sees that the file is not there in the system, is not there in the system. So generally what it will do, it will say file not found and then completely get out of the software system. Completely get out of the software system. On the other hand, what a smart programmer will do, the smart programmer will trap the code, error code, and immediately after that open file, it will say, it will ask, it will have a statement saying that if error code number such and such, then display on the screen that file does not exist. Do you want to try again? And make a loop again and again. But the control will remain within the software. Control will remain within the software. This is developing reliable software. Now, obviously, this code becomes redundant if there is nothing wrong. This code is definitely defensive in the sense that you are apprehending occurrence of some error and adjusting your code accordingly, which will not be required if there is no error. This will definitely add some overhead to the machine. So if you use such error trapping routines many times, it is likely to have an adverse impact on the response time. But then that is the price you pay for improving the reliability of the product. Same thing may happen when you read a file, one record at a time. At the end, what do you do? So we have to write, read file such and such, at end, do this. This is typical reliability. This is typically the reliability of a software. Robustness. It will always remain robust, and you may assume that user may make different kinds of errors. But we cannot say that you made an error, that's why the software did not work. As a developer, you have to anticipate what are the kinds of errors the users can make, and then take appropriate action before the error is made. This is reliability. This is reliability. And it is very important when you write any large code in a professional manner. Question? Any question? Okay. Now we will discuss fault tolerance and redundancy. We have given you some example of redundancy right now. Now, let's explain these terms, fault tolerance and redundancy, in the light of whatever we have discussed now. It happens nowadays, it doesn't happen that much, but it used to happen very common that you have switched on the TV, somehow it's not working. Then slap the TV right, left, here and there, and the TV starts working. You want to start the engine of your car. Nothing is working. Push the car from behind. Suddenly it starts moving. Tube light in the room does not glow. Rotate it a bit uh, here and there, it starts glowing. So, what is your call? Are these appliances faulty or not? Faulty or not? So, faulty or not? So, when we work on some engineering products, most of the time the word faulty is not binary in nature. It's just not say that you just do not say that this is faulty and this is not faulty. Some gray area is there in between. If we consider software also as a product, then the software should also have that property. If we plan to have a session on software testing, just like this, after this session, a series of sessions we conclude today, there I would like to concentrate more on those aspects: fault tolerance, reliability, redundancy of software in practice. So, software also need not have to be working digitally, just say yes or no in terms of whether it is faulty or not. And it is also very much feasible to implement. Of course, that depends on the application, domain, and many other aspects. But why? How is it possible to implement? Very simple. Any code, any program, you must be knowing flowcharts. You must have drawn flowcharts. You must be uh, flowcharts. And what is a flowchart? For any program, you have start and you have end. From start, you come to end following different paths. From start, you come to end following different paths. Which path it will follow depends on the inputs, conditions, and all those. But at any point, for any iteration, all the paths are not considered. Only a very small subset of all the possible paths from start to end are put to use. If I know that for some paths there is a problem, for some paths there is a problem, then you have to choose your inputs in such a way that those paths will never come. Then the user will never feel that there is semblance of any fault in the system. Something like same thing. You must be studying computer networks where it is discussed in great details. You want to move from position A to position B. You want to move from position A to position B. There could be many paths. Some paths might be faulty. Of course, what you will do? You will avoid those faulty paths and take appropriate action. This is fault tolerance. This is fault tolerance. And it is natural that to have fault tolerance, you have to have redundancy. Otherwise, how do we have fault tolerance? In our example of network, there will be shortest path from A to B, and one path is enough. But if there is only one path, then there won't be any tolerance. Because if any edge within the path breaks, you cannot reach from A to B. That's why you know what is a tree in a graph. What is tree? In a directed, connected graph, it has the property that from any node to any other node, there is exactly one and only one path, and there is no cycle. So if you have a graph, kind of a network, and you want to have it in place, any fault in any edge will disconnect some of the nodes from some other nodes because there is only one path. These kind of problems arise very much in computer networks and for those who are studying VLSI design. I know one researcher who is an alumni of IIT Kharagpur is in University of Southern California, who is doing exceedingly well in doing research on faulty ICs. You know what is an integrated circuit. So if you have a chip, very, very complicated, very expensive chip, and you see that it's not working for some parts, they make hugely intensive research to figure out which parts of such a complete circuitry are faulty and which part are not. So what they do, any IC will have its characteristics expressed through input-output relationship. Like if you have a set of inputs, you are supposed to have an idea about what would be the outputs corresponding to those inputs. This input-output mapping, they tailor it accordingly, make a subset of that, so that those inputs which have the potential to lead to error, they're just left out of the input set. So if they give you that IC, which is faulty to some extent, with this revised set of input-output relationship, you won't even know that some portions of this is faulty. Because you will never use that because they have excluded that from there. So one approach is, once you get a faulty circuit, you try to repair that circuit. And the other thing is, if the circuit is too big, you try to get a subset of the circuit which still work reasonably well. With this kind of approach. But we do also have to accept that sometimes this fault tolerance may lead to degradation, in the performance of the system. Think of a transport network from section A to, think of a real life scenario, say railways, think of the railways. Say from Howrah to Burdwan, there is some there is main line and there is chord line after Bali station. Both the lines take from Howrah to Burdwan. If one line after Bali is for whatever reason not working, the entire load would be diverted to the other line, which will work, which will take you from Howrah to Burdwan. But naturally, there is a chance of having slower movement because of the heavier traffic. Because of the heavier traffic. So, fault tolerance in many cases is likely to have some impact on the performance of the system under consideration. Break of 30 seconds. Any question? Any observation? Think about this. Any question or any observation? Okay. Next topic is reusability. This is another very important topic in many universities. The courses like software engineering, operations research, project management, industrial engineering, they have a one full semester course on reusability. And there are many dimensions of this simple word. I'll try to decode at least some of them. When you buy from the market the holder for a bulb, electric bulb, you need not have to bother about whether it's LED, the conventional bulb, and one. So the bulb can be, a holder can be used in many cases. Get down to even still micro level. If you think of the IC boards which make an electronic gadget, if the board is faulty, still it has got some value. Once the some mobile is faulty, still it has some value. Why? The components used in the mobile, some of them, mobile, it may not be that true, but in some TV or some other cases, they may be using some ICs, registers, capacitors, inductors, and all those, which can very well be used for developing some other products, which can be used developing for developing some other products. Think of your software. When you want to find, say, log x, having given x as an input to find the log of x, you all know that log can be expressed in a series. But do you really compute that? No. You call a function called log and get the value of it. Similarly, random function. You give a value or seed or something and you get a value. Sin x, cos x, tan x, all those. So when you all these are library functions. All these are library functions. where you having given some input parameter, the corresponding value is computed by that function, and this gives you back the value. And probably as an application developer, you are not interested how that value is computed. And there are many sophisticated, even MATLAB. What is MATLAB doing? What is SPSS? Mathematica, all these are doing. Interpolation, matrix inversion, simultaneous equation solutions. While working on some complicated software development, some smaller package, micro level developments, you like to have some already pre-constructed blocks, and you just use it there. In civil engineering also, you will see when you make a road, one way is you develop it fully, and the other way is you use some blocks, use some pre-casted blocks and make it there. So from developer's perspective, when we discuss reusability, we have to think when we write we have to write a say application, a software application. Is it for reuse? Just like say header.h, stdio.h, conio.h. So am I developing something like that? That is developing something which is to be reused later on. Another approach is with reuse. That means I am developing a product which is supposed to import some already developed micro level codes. So why do I have to think about this? Because some data is likely to flow between one application to another application, and hence compatibility is very important. Compatibilities, we need to have very clear idea beforehand on what should be the characteristics of the data, real, integer, any further constraints and all those. Otherwise, I just cannot use that. So this leads to what is known as standardization. You have to follow some international standards. You have to follow some international standards while developing any engineering product, including software. What are the, and it's a very huge topic. Once you work for an organization, big organization, they will have specific standards about naming a variable or an object, naming a function, naming a program, so that anybody can understand looking at that. So otherwise it cannot be reusable. Another reason for maintaining these kind of standards comes from what is known as software development databases. What is that? We have already mentioned that a good software design should consist of modules, and it's basically interconnection of all those modules that make the product. So that gives you the software architecture. Suppose I have a software of version 1.0. It may have 20 modules. It may have 20 modules, and they are interconnected through very well defined interfaces. That is version 1.0. Tomorrow, for various reasons, we have to upgrade that software. That becomes software version 2.0. Now, in 1.0, we had, say, 20 modules. In 2.0, we may have 25 modules, 15 taken from previous one and 10 new ones. And 5 modules of the previous one remains unused in version 2.0. Now come version 3.0, even more advanced version, where we can have either more or less number of modules. But now, say two out of those modules used in version 1 and not used in version 2 may be used in version 3. Reusability of those functions. This is possible if and only if right at the time of developing those modules, you maintain standards. So that subsequently others may use it very clearly, very easily, seamlessly. And these are the issues which we generally do not explore or practice at the college level. But the day you join the industry, these are the issues you will have to adapt. So that's the reason I'm trying to impress upon you what the transition for a student from some university to some software industry means in reality. And some idea, some knowledge about these requirements before you apply for your job, discuss with the senior personnel of that industry, gives you more confidence and helps you and helps the industry people also understand your preparedness for which may help them in ascertain your suitability so far as that particular industry is concerned. Okay? Then comes aesthetics. Aesthetic, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to define aesthetics. It varies from country to country, culture to culture. But of course, you all understand what the meaning aesthetics mean and the kind of significance it has in marketing a product. I'm not sure how much you are aware about the huge amount of research funding is made on determining the shape of the body of an automobile, the bends, curves, space. Now, naturally, they have very high correlation to the actual engineering requirements like wind speed, wind value, road condition, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, the look of the vehicle also matters a lot. How it looks like. For those who are familiar with the the poems, poetries, songs of Rabindranath Tagore, if you see any of his writings, whenever he has to make some overriding, some blackening, and all those, the way he used to do it, that itself made some kind of a great picture, great picture. That is aesthetics. And this is one area which need not be purchased by spending huge amount of money. You have to have vision. You have to have very clear idea about the culture of the society where you are going to sell your product. Some product which may be accepted very well in society may not be accepted at all in some other society. And the reason need not have to be functional specifications. In many cases, it would be non-functional parameters. And aesthetics goes beyond even non-functional parameters. Goes beyond non-functional parameters. In some, you must have been to many movie halls. Look, just entering the movie hall, you can find a different kind of ambience, which is very difficult to explain in words, but you know what it means. Similarly, in many products, somehow you like the product. Not because of its usefulness, functional parameters, non-functional parameters, and all those. And remember, there is a difference between aesthetics and brand equity. Brand equity is entirely different thing. Like if you want to go for a mobile, iPhones have a different brand equity. Of course, they're very good. Of course, they're very good. But it's not fully aesthetics. Brand equity is built, developed, maybe through marketing also, and all those. And aesthetics is more or less implicit, inherent kind of attribute. Just like in software development, aesthetics comes in big form while you write your code. When you write your code, just follow the nomenclature. Say you are writing a code with for loop, next, while do while, for next. Maintain, say, gap of 4 or 5 characters from left to the next block. And then again 4 to 5 from 4 to the next block. So that looking at the code itself, you have some kind of a soothing effect. As if you are reading some kind of poetry instead of making it random. When you write a GUI, think of the people who are going to access that GUI, age group, ethnicity, and all those. And then you decide what would be the size of each font, what would be color of each font, which comes where, topmost left, right, bottom, etc., etc. Again, these are not strictly speaking aesthetics, but this gives you a sense of aesthetic behavior. And finally, user friendliness. That's the ultimate goal of developing any software product. In fact, for any product. Today, we are in a customer driven society. Customer is the king. Whatever customer demands, the producers have to respond. So it has to be very user friendly. For somebody who is driving, say, Maruti for last 10 years, tomorrow, if he gets to drive, say, some Toyota, he will not find much of a difference, at least in terms of kahan pe petrol tank hai, where is the flashlight, how to operate it, and all those. This is user friendliness. This is user friendliness. If you work on Android operating system, whatever be the mobile you are using, you don't have any problem. Maybe here and there a few small issues. So that's another reason why many top brand product designers, they try to ensure that their product is unique from others. That depends on the marketing policy, development policy, policy of the top management, that our customers have to be with us. So we make our products accordingly. Another policy is we make it open. We make it open so that they can go anywhere and we are ready to compete with anybody else. Just like when you work on Windows, you are in Windows. But when we are using a free software, open software, I should not say free, open software, you are not restricted to using some specific, the characteristics of that. So that's all. And what is the next one? And this already I have discussed while discussing structured programming, modularity, sequence, condition, iteration, and all those. And finally, I will conclude by reading this sentence once again. Discipline of software engineering deals with studies on engineering, science, engineering, technology, and management of feasibility study, design, development, testing, deployment, maintenance, and evolution of software products and services based on mutually agreed upon specifications, time estimates, and cost estimates, with embedded focus on maintainability, scalability, reusability, reliability, upgradability, and reconfigurability. And I would suggest all of you who have attended this series of talks, just try to compare yourself where you are today vis-a-vis where you were on the first day of this series of talks, and just see whether now you are a different student altogether. In the sense, on the first day, you are a bright, Student, today you are all set to join the software industry. You do have the background. You do, you had already satisfied the necessary conditions for joining the software industry. Today, you do also have the requirements of sufficiency to be confident, to contribute to the software industry. Any question? Okay. Thank you.